Welcome to another edition of Black and Azul, now in our 27th episode. Charles Wollin with you here, Jamin Moore, Joel Soria, and just not the Quakes night, and not their night whatsoever. 4-0 loss against LAFC. Almost could have been 5-0 or more. Matias Almeida sent off as well. Questionable calls here and there, refereeing decisions here and there. But let's start with the result and Matias Almeida getting sent off. Joel.
Obviously not a positive performance by the Quakes, but at the same time, it wasn't the worst that they've shown this season. We'll go back to that 5-0 defeat in San Jose. It was much worse. I think defensively today, the Quakes showed a lot of those inklings that they showed against LAFC then. It was a very open game. I felt both teams obviously had the chances. The numbers don't lie. The XG says, the Quakes were near 1.4, I believe. Yeah. LAFC was around 3.7. So they both had the fair share of chances. San Jose obviously had the possession on them. They had 11 shots on target. But what I'm leaving with is the reaction from Matias Almeida, the bad officiating from the officiating crew. So much to unpack.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even know where to start with all this. It was just a roller coaster of emotions from the get-go, and I was in the car and listening to the call on KNBR from Ted Ramey, and then it was a goal, and then it was a penalty, and I'm texting you guys going, is this, was that a handball? And it's 100% a handball. And then I literally just turn on my screen and everything is unfolding right at that moment. There's a handball in the box. There's no VAR review for it. Matias Almeida in Spanish is talking to the fourth official, and we've heard conflicting reports from people nearby on what we've seen on social media so far. We don't exactly know what happened, but what's clear is that Matias Almeida felt that he should have gotten a review, and a review didn't happen. Whether he was led to believe there would have been a review or not, at this point, I'm not sure is very material, but he certainly felt like he was going to get a review when it didn't happen. He had words with the fourth official. There may have been contact. Security got involved. Augustine, the translator, got sent off first, I think,
prior
to
everything
direction.
Unfolding, correct.
I mean, it was just one thing after another, and then to follow it up with that, as soon as Almeida's off, now all of a sudden, Carlos Vela, works the magic that only Carlos Vela can in this league, and just scores a wonder goal. But the Quakes are completely discombobulated, and if VAR is looked at, and if that turns into a penalty, the rest of the game unfolds potentially in a very different way. Now you're talking a 2-1 game. Now you're talking Matias Almeida still on the sideline. Instead, Almeida's gone. The Quakes are in disarray. LAFC scores a goal. Now it's 3-0, and Almeida's gone, and no one knows exactly what it was said.
Theoretically speaking, and we can get into this a little later, though, if that call were to go in the Quakes' favor, would a 2-1 still be, would it still play in the Quakes' favor, given the fact that the 11 that they put out tonight, some of those players, I'll say it, Aníbal Godoy specifically, weren't up to the test today. Like I said, we can get back to that, but obviously the red flags, the alarm bells were in that incident that involved the fourth official and Matias Almeida himself, which also involved a security guard that works there at Banc of California Stadium, and it also involved fans. And I think that's when things got really out of hand. Yeah. The fact that Matias went up the stands and tried to, interact with these fans. He tried to engage with them. Obviously, the fans were provoking him. It seemed like everyone was provoking him at that time, but I felt like there needed to be much better composure from Matias. I get where he's coming from. I think his, for him to go on this big rant is justified. VAR and pro referees, they've shown it time and time again this season. They're just not at the level that they need to be. But let's keep in mind what happened a couple of weeks ago. And I'm talking about the Mike Pecky situation, right? Yeah. But given Mike Pecky does have a long history of throwing tantrums, in the middle of a game, after a game. but let's keep that in mind all along here. We don't know what was said between Matias and the fourth referee. We don't know how pro referees are going to use that to their advantage. I think right now this officiating crew is in a very, very vulnerable place. The reflectors are certainly on them for all the bad reasons. How can they turn this against Matias? Matias obviously did not carry himself in the most positive way. And it could potentially, escalate. Maybe a 2-game suspension, certainly a fine. But who knows? Like the Petke situation, it could really unravel behind the scenes overnight.
Yeah, we don't believe that the same type of situation is going to exist here in terms of the racist type remarks and stuff.
Oh, definitely not.
Obviously, that's not going to come from a Latino manager, I don't believe. But the abuse of officials, verbal abuse,
that's what I was referring to.
Account. Yeah,
right.
Potential abuse of fans. Verbal abuse of fans here can also be taken into account. And so it's difficult to say what was actually going on the sidelines at that moment. But what we do know is that it's going to result in a fine, almost for sure. And he doesn't care about the fine. Matias Almeida does not care about the fine. But what's going to be potentially damaging to the Quakes is they have 2 very big home games now coming up. Chances decent that Matias Almeida is going to be out for one or both of those 2 games. Depends on how quickly the incident is reviewed and how quickly they come to a decision, but there's a decent chance that whatever is going to come is going to happen as early as Vancouver on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he is the Quakes' biggest weapon this year. And, I did send out a tweet earlier this evening about what happened and seeing it through my eyes and seeing it on the television and hearing from, what the commentators were saying and translating right then and there. I'll just put it like this. I'm a Quakes fan. I grew up with the Quakes. I heard John Schrader call games on the radio from 1997 when I got to this country and on. And so when I said, Matias Almeida needs to be better, and what I mean by that is just clarify with the referee, have a chat with him, and then go down the touchline. Just go down the touchline. You don't want it to get worse than it is. You don't want to make it a 2, 3, 4-game suspension. And so, I care about the Quakes. I care about this team. I'm a fan, but I'm also on this show, and I'm just giving my opinion. I'm not anti-Matias Almeida in any way. In fact, I've loved what he's done this year. So Javier Leon, who's reached out here, I just want to clarify myself to you and the rest of the fans that are watching this show, about that. And make that very clear. And obviously, you're correct with your comment. His character and leadership and passion brings what we need with the Quakes, as opposed to in years in the past. It's just one thing cascading after a next. With tonight's game down 2-0, 15 minutes in, it was unjust that the Quakes didn't get a penalty, especially after LAFC had their first penalty shout turned down, their second penalty shout turned up. They make the penalty, and the Quakes have a clear penalty, a clear handball, with a defender touching that. And I don't blame Matias Almeida whatsoever for his passion at all. His passion is brilliant. It's beautiful. It's football romantic at its best. And no one is blaming the passion. All I meant was it's just got to be better to just go down the sideline, have a chat with the referee, be heated with the referee if you want, debate with the referee if you want, but just go down the touchline, have your way, go to the locker room, get these guys in there, down 2-0, and have it as it is. So anyway, just wanted to explain myself with that, and I appreciate you guys tuning into the show. This is your guys' show too, and we're going to be taking a lot of questions tonight based on your guys' comments and your questions. I know there's a lot of Quakes fans with a lot of different feelings and sentiments tonight, especially after this game, which I thought would be kind of a mini playoff game, a mini preview of what was to see. But again, Matias Almeida putting up a little bit of a different lineup today, Joel, something a little different that may have thought that, he was maybe saving some cards for Saturday potentially.
Yeah,
and I know Jamin, I'm not sure, yeah.
That's what Jamin was trying to propose to me. I'm not entirely sure. I think that it was time to alter the 11. I think that the 11 that was effective for the most part of the last 3 months was dwindling down. The fire wasn't there anymore. So I think, the changes came at the right time. And I really thought that it was going to be a surprise that Bob Bradley wasn't expecting and his coaching staff wasn't either. And I thought it would play to the Quakes' advantage. Unfortunately, everything backfired. Aníbal Godoy was awful the first 45 minutes, for lack of better words. Marcos Lopez, again, proved to be too green on the field. Poor quality crosses. Wasn't defending all that well. Nick Lima continues to struggle. I think that should be said. And, Andy Rios looked okay. I thought, he brings in something different in that midfielder. He was playing a midfield role, sort of like the Magnus role. I think he plays it a bit better given the fact that he has more pace on his side. He's a bit more agile, can really connect with the passes, a bit more versatile. But all in all, this team completely backfired on Almeida, 20 minutes in, 15 minutes in. It was just a really, really tough night for them in that sense. But then again, they did have some positives. They were able to create moving forward. I think that had a lot to do, though, with the fact that the game was just very open. And that after, the whole incident with Matias Almeida, the game just really opened up. And certainly, the Quakes knew that they were going to get back into it. And LAFC were probably just ready to score or maybe sit back.
Changes to the lineup are fine. I just don't think, one, that it was the right players. If coming into the game, if you're saying your intention is to put a 19-year-old on the same side as Carlos Vela, there's something wrong, okay? That is not a lineup change that I think is in favor of the Quakes whatsoever. There's nothing wrong with Tommy Thompson, nothing wrong with Nick Lima. He could have stuck with that for at least one more game and could have made a change this weekend. If you want to take a chance against Vancouver. Don't take a chance against LAFC.
Tommy Thompson's absence, by the way, was a coaching decision, I heard. So.
And that's fine. You also have someone who can play left back in Fierro, someone who's played in Liga MX at the level that Carlos Vela has been playing at, someone who knows how to handle that type of talent a little bit better. Now, that's not to say
Fierro was poor.
That's not to say he showed it tonight. But before the game, if I'm making a decision on do I want Fierro or do I want 19-year-old Lopez.
But let's keep in mind, Lopez was starting when the Quakes were playing well. He was a part of that group.
Sure, but this is Carlos Vela's side, right? It's not the same thing as any other team in the league. You can put him in that situation against 22 other teams, not against LAFC. So I think that's where one problem is. The second problem is Guram Kasia. He's been at fault for multiple goals over the last 3 games, and I've been a Kasia supporter. I think that the guy is a legend in his country, in Georgia, and I think he deserves a ton of respect. He's one of the few people in that area who has stood up for the rights of people who need a voice, right? And he's been great in that regard. And I have a ton of respect for Guram, but he hasn't been good. And this was the time to bring in Cummings. This was the time to make that particular change. They didn't do it, and he was, again, a problem on at least a couple of the goals tonight. So that's another change that should have happened. So again, I don't have problems with the changes. We knew we were going to have to see a change with Aníbal Godoy coming in probably anyway because of Judson being out for yellow card accumulation. That was a given. But the other changes I mostly had a problem with. Speaking of Judson, though, I do think that a lot of the problems that we saw tonight in terms of the way that the central midfield was bossed by LAFC, and they did really win the central midfield. The Quakes outshot them 22-18, not on target, but they had the majority of the possession. They outpassed them 480-440. So the stats tended to favor the Quakes in a lot of the game. They had 2 problems. One, they couldn't finish,
which has been a reoccurring theme this season.
Theme, and I think we should dive into that a little bit more here. And the other problem pretty much was the central midfield was getting ripped apart, and it was putting the defense into awkward situations where they were going to have to break from their one-on-one man marking. And a lot of that had to do with Judson not being there and Godoy being there instead. He's just not as defensive as Judson. You've been a proponent of Judson this entire season. I wasn't high on him at the beginning of the season, but I think he's proven his worth. And the Quakes really missed him tonight.
Yeah, it's those lateral runs that he makes, darting 20 yards this way, 30 yards this way, and he's the first man through central midfield that cuts off the run into the Quakes' final third. As the Quakes commit more numbers into the attacking phase of the game, and you could kind of see that was part of the rocky start, was having a different destroyer, different defensive central midfield player right at the heart, right of the base, in there. And so, a huge thing for me, they were just never able to settle until after the second goal. And then you get this chance from Vako, penalty, okay, and then you get this Danny Houston breakaway in this first half that you and I were chatting about, which was one of the most golden opportunities in this first half, and you have chances to tie the game, make up for having a little bit of issues in central midfield, not being able to stabilize. And the Quakes, yeah, okay, cool, 53% possession to 47, but that number a little bit higher usually than just 53%, usually gets up to around 57% of the game. So I think a failure to be able to dictate their mark on the game from the beginning, from the outset. And when you're playing away in Major League Soccer, and you're playing against the best team in Major League Soccer, and you're playing against that team at home, that team was all over the Quakes in the first 20 minutes, and quite rightly so. They got their first two goals and never looked back.
You can't be half in on the road.
Yeah.
The Quakes were half in. They weren't all the way at the level that they're usually at, and they weren't sitting back, right? And they got kind of caught in the middle with all the transitions, and they got ripped apart in one-on-one situations.
Look, to me, the two things to focus on, and one I already spoke about, is the Matias Almeida incident. Because, this means that they will have to go and play 2-3 matches without their coach, who, as we know, is the pillar and the heartbeat of this team. The second thing that I don't think is being talked about a lot is that the Quakes have been playing pretty poorly the past 4 games. And in fact, I think the Quakes probably told themselves after they played the Columbus Crew that they had been figured out. I think that 1-1 draw in San Jose against the Columbus Crew, against a really, really good Columbus Crew, was a big slap in the face. The Quakes never came back from that. They've been down and under ever since Caleb Porter gave Matias Almeida a little bit of a coaching one-up, right? And that's what's happened. They go out and they draw against the Columbus Crew. They go to Colorado. They should come back with 3 points. They fall short. And they do that against Sporting Kansas City as well. 1 point in the last 4 games for a team that is fighting tooth and nail for a playoff spot. It's not good enough. And this team was in a really good place just a month ago. I think they're back to being their former selves. I think that is the biggest red flag out of all of this, is that the Quakes have plateaued and they're starting to become who they once were.
Yeah, it's showing up in the finishing. Tonight we saw it quite a bit. The Quakes almost look like they were the 2018 Quakes in their finishing.
We were talking
about. You mentioned that earlier, Danny
right? Houston is the epitome of that, by the way.
Yeah.
He could easily have 10 goals or more this season.
Absolutely. He's had as many opportunities as
Chris
Wondolowski has.
The Quakes have finally had a player that has scored more goals than Chris in a season. But the record still shows that the Quakes can't survive without Wondolowski.
No, they can't. And it's I use the term regression to the mean. I'm not the only person to do that. The Quakes are kind of regressing to the mean right now. Now, Matias, we've seen, has been able to take this team and be able to push them to a level beyond what I believe their talent shows. It can happen again, but they've taken a hit to their confidence, and tonight did them no favors in that department. And it'll be very interesting to see what Quakes team walks in against, pretty much the worst or second worst team in the league, depending upon your opinion on FC Cincinnati. on Saturday.
They were
have an
saying the same
opportunity at
thing.
home.
They were saying the same thing about the Rapids. Same thing was said about Sporting Kansas City. How did that turn out?
Yeah, the difference here is let's break those games down just a little bit here, because we didn't get a chance to talk about Sporting Kansas City since the last episode. Just very briefly, in all three of those games, the Quakes dominated the first half. In fact, you could say that the opposition tended to pretty much sit back and let the Quakes have the ball.
Second half lethargy.
Right? Why? Because one, the Quakes, if they do regress to the mean on the finishing, they can't break down a team that's sitting 10 men behind the ball. They don't have the skill for that, and they don't have the finishing ability for that in general. Yes, does Vaco pull some magic out every once in a while, or Wando pull some magic off every once in a while if he finally gets a decent cross? Yeah, absolutely. But again, we've kind of regressed back to the mean here, and that's effectively showing, what this Quakes team, had kind of overcome for a little bit. It's the second half lethargy, right? It's coming out and allowing the other team to change the game and to dictate the style back to you, and it happened 3 straight games, and that's not the way the game played out tonight, but it's LAFC. The Quakes are going to need to overcome that particular thing. The concern that we'd expressed this before, the last time we had done a post-game show from Avaya, we talked about this. We talked about the concern of a team that plays this style and wearing down and tiring down over the course of a long season. There's a lot of players who are on the pitch right now, people like Tommy Thompson is a good example of that. Jackson Ewell's another example of that. They are not used to logging these types of minutes.
No, never.
They never have, okay? So now this team is pushing and pushing to try to play this system. They've got some tired legs, and I agree. They needed an infusion of new players tonight. I just think it was the wrong players. But make no mistake, they've got to overcome this. They've got to find a way to hold the intensity for 90 minutes, or they're going to continue to give up results. They're going to get draws where they should get wins.
They can't afford it. FC Dallas is right there.
Let's go into our questions. We've got a lot of questions. First and foremost, once again, our show is an inclusive show. Please comment or give us your questions about this evening's performance, other performances, tactical questions. We've got it right here. The first question comes in from 85 Whiskey. 85 Whiskey writes, what do we need to do to come back from this rough run of form? Looks like our chances to make playoffs are a lot thinner, especially with so little home games remaining. I'll start on this. I think the Quakes need to win back-to-back matches that are winnable matches at home. The first against Vancouver, the next one at home against Orlando City. And then they go on the road against a tough Western Conference opponent in Real Salt Lake. They need to get a result from that game too. And then the final remaining matches, they're really up and down. NYCFC, Atlanta United, Philadelphia, Sounders, and then Portland. But they need to get 2 games at home to kind of reassert themselves back in this Western Conference table. Let's show the Western Conference table. I'm not worried so much about it's getting thinner and thinner. Everyone's about even. The Quakes are 4 points off from the second place position, Minnesota United. We spoke about that a few weeks ago, about how we feel each team's strengths and weaknesses are. But 2 wins at home out of a total of 6 points is key the next couple of games. And I think that this team will be eager to make that up because, like Joel and like Jamin said, you could clearly understand the disappointment of against the Columbus Crew, and you could clearly understand the disappointment against Colorado, the 11th out of 12th placed team in the West. And so getting out of that run of form, it's winning matches at home, winning them convincingly too. And so one thing referring to the finishing and just bringing everything full circle, and what Jamin was referring to about finishing is the Quakes were winning games with clinical finishing. I mean, clinical finishing and scoring multiple goals in games. These aren't just 1-0ers or 2-1 matches. Winning games 3 or 4-0, 3-1, comprehensive performances. I mean, let's be honest, my friends. The games against the LA Galaxy, comprehensive performances. And so those need to happen, and those need to happen at home. So that's my spiel on that question. Really great question from 85 Whiskey there as well.
Yeah, just in the last 4 games, 1 run of play goal. 1. Penalty, corner kick, 1 run of play goal, last 4 games. This is where the problem is at We showed it again tonight with the way that the finishing went, the way that the play was in the final third. They have to solve that problem more than anything.
Generating is not a problem.
Generating is not a problem. Possessing the ball and getting it to that point is not the problem, right? And if the Quakes hold on to the ball, the best defense is a good offense. I think Matthias more or less believes that philosophy here. That's why he tries to possess so much.
Bit choppy the defensive play was tonight, and obviously a lot of that has to do with the fact that the game was just completely open. The Quakes try to push for a late goal. At times you would see 6-7 players over that center line mark, and then would come LAFC coming, flying with 4 players, trying to counter-track, trying to walk in the ball, essentially, is what they were trying to do. But going back to that question asked by Whiskey, I don't know, it's hard to say. I'm going to be waiting to hear what the decision is going to be on Matias Almeida. Is El Pelado going to sit out a game or 2? Is he going to be allowed to train or to coach his players when they arrive back in San Jose? I don't know. That certainly is going to take a big toll on these players psychologically. Like I said, he is a heartbeat. He is, the moderator. He is, the captain of the ship. Without him, the sailors don't know how to get that thing going. So
yeah, just to point out, Mike Petke, when he was suspended before he was let go, he was not just suspended for the games. He was suspended completely from the club for 2 weeks.
He wasn't able to communicate with them.
This is not fully a like-for-like situation, but with the referee contact, with the fan interaction, things like that went down, that's the concern.
And with what he was exchanging with the 4th official, which I think is what Pro is going to hold back on him.
Right. So that's I think where the concern is at.
Next question is from Satish Murugesan, and he writes, do you think going with a totally different lineup today by Almeida was a mistake? We just chatted a little bit about the lineup changes, and Jamin, you were a little bit more passionate about this. Who would you have changed, and why would have been a different partnership at the center back position? Does Tommy Thompson start for you? I know you obviously would have preferred Fierro there instead of Marco Lopez.
I think it's not the game to start Rios. I don't have a problem with Rios. I thought he did mostly fine. I think he was in a tough situation because of Judson not being behind him, so he kind of was part of the culprit of the Quakes getting ripped apart at times. But I think he was
tracking back a lot.
He was tracking back a lot, but it just wasn't the right game, and the reason for it is this: I believe that the Quakes would have been a little bit better off without having Judson in there, to have Eriksson be able to drop back deeper and play a little bit more of a defensive role, as we've seen him do in situations this year. I think that would have helped out some of the defending tonight a bit. I think the Cummings change was overdue. It needs to be made by Saturday, or there's a chance that the result could go sideways a bit there as well. I think you have to take a look. Are Vako and Espinoza both fresh enough to push them both on Saturday in starting roles? I think there's an opportunity here potentially to look at one of those as getting them a break. I know Espinoza had a game off a couple games ago, but the question is, are the Quakes becoming too predictable? And if you change it up a bit, might you be able to catch teams not as well prepared? I think some of that was behind what Almeida's changes were tonight. I just don't think they were effective and in the right spots.
And that's what I was alluding to, right? Is the fact that maybe Bradley was analyzing it a certain way. These guys are going to come and play the style that they've been playing with the same players that they've been fielding. I think that's one of the reasons why Almeida chose to go with somewhat of a peculiar 11. Obviously, it didn't work out. I don't think Fierro, belongs to be a starting left back. He's not a left back. He's played at right back, during his time at Chivas. Certainly, Marcos Lopez is.
But neither is Lopez. He's a left winger.
I mean, but he's played left back at Sporting Cristal.
Sure, and
Fierro never played left.
Fierro has played left back for Almeida.
Right back. That's the difference. I feel like Almeida feels too comfortable playing these fullbacks on either side. And we saw that with Nick Lima this season. It's happened all season long with Nick. And it has made him look pretty bad. I mean, he just hasn't been as good on the left side. there are a lot of changes that are going to need to come.
So we're back to the point that the Quakes don't have a left back again.
I guess so.
Is that where we're at?
I guess so.
There's four players that can play the position, but none of them can play the position.
Who's the natural left back?
Time to try Shea Salinas again under Almeida's system?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Here's the thing about the predictability thing is Matias Almeida has a clear system of the way he wants to play. But if the players don't finish in those positions and they're getting there and this team doesn't score goals, then they're in the situation that they're in right now. And so, they had the chances this evening to tie the match.
Yep.
Or
Always.
Yeah. We were just chatting about this while watching the game.
Yeah.
And so I don't think
the penalty. If Danny Houston finishes the one-on-one, it's a 2-1 game.
I don't think it's a predictability
clear
issue.
One-on-one,
I don't think it's a predictability issue with personnel. With system. It's personnel and making sure that they're finishing.
Like I said, it definitely does have. It doesn't have anything to do with predictability. It has everything to do with the players not believing that they can still carry out the system 100% game in and game out. It's them really not believing in themselves anymore after that Columbus Crew match. They felt like they were outdueled, which they were, at home in front of their fans, tooth and nail. I mean, the Columbus Crew went in there knowing very well the way that the Quakes were going to play. The Quakes didn't try to play in disguise. They stuck to their game. They were just, Porter came better prepared. The second half went their way. And ever since then, the Quakes haven't really put something formidable out. And they've kind of drawn back from the style that they've played all season long.
Yeah, they like I said, they were kind of half in between sometimes. Like they weren't fully committed into some of the one-on-one matchups tonight. You saw that the way people went into the tackles, very sloppy tackles at times. The man marking wasn't as tight as it was. They were probably respecting the players maybe a little bit too much just because of the uniform that they're wearing. I think there's a player or two on that team that deserves a bit of respect. Absolutely. I think going, fully, tight with Carlos Vela is probably going to get you nothing but anguish. But at the same time, there's 8 or 9 of those players that the Quakes are fully able to stick with.
Daniel Zohar, to Jamin's remarks there, we've been getting scored on a lot recently. What needs to be done to fix the gaps? You're just chatting about players making tackles in interesting places or not making the tackles when they need to. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, and we can have a nice chat about this. But this system, the high press and the man-to-man marking, you stay with your player, but you've got to make the tackle. You've got to make tackles in this system. You got to get stuck in, and Matias Almeida asks for that, especially at home. And that's why the Quakes' home form has been so consistent, so good, because they're fired up and they're ready to go. And again, they haven't lost at home since March 30th. And so getting scored on a lot, what needs to be done to fix the gaps, the tackling needed to be a little bit better tonight. Communication. The back line as well needed to step up a little bit more and make those tackles earlier. And then again, coming back to central midfield to the point that I was making about Anibal Godoy switching in for Judson. Judson now so comfortable playing as the holding midfield player and making these darting runs, being able to cut out the play, being able to break that up, play all the way back to the goalkeeper Vega, and then play out to the center backs to relieve the pressure. The Quakes get a chance to breathe, and then they build again out of the back. And it all really does go through him when that happened. And the first 15, 20 minutes, again, broke down. Difficulty making tackles up high, especially 1v1. And so that's kind of what occurred. What needs to be done to fix the gaps? Just better tackling. And staying with your man mark.
Commit to the system.
Commit to it.
Yeah, commit to this and commit to it in your first third, right? In your defensive third, it seemed like the Quakes were losing every one-on-one battle when defending. They couldn't stop Dio when he came on. They certainly couldn't stop Vela. They couldn't stop Rossi, and they couldn't stop Perez, who probably has less than 90 minutes. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but he's not a consistent starter for LAFC. They just couldn't make a tackle to save their lives.
Yeah, and very desperate defending. I hate desperate defending. It's the thing that'll get me more than anything else. Very desperate defending tonight. A lot of deep defending, a lot of last second clearances, and basically expecting LAFC to score. And
right.
and you listen to the announcers, and don't get me started about the Univision announcers. We'll be here all night.
They in it, by the way.
Yeah,
they rebranded.
But basically, as soon as LAFC crosses midfield, they're going to score. At will is the way that it comes across. It's anyway, that is what it is.
Back to Satish Murugesan. What exactly is the coaching decision about Tommy's absence?
I just heard coach's decision. That's it. I don't know the specifics. People usually don't give specifics. I'm not entirely sure on that.
Okay.
Gave a pregame interview.
Yeah, he did.
Another interesting one from Ren 1018, and I'm going to throw this right to you, Joel, and I think we're going to get a good response out of Joel on this one. Is the media coverage destroyed this team, really didn't need all those articles and videos on how good the Quakes are now. So do you maybe, and I guess what he's referring to is, do you get the sense that maybe the Quakes have been figured out potentially from so much good, positive media about, oh, Matias Almeida this, the system this, da-da-da-da, because that's how I'm reading this comment. But I'm not sure. Is that something that could have been a downfall?
Have they garnered attention? Yes.
Yeah.
Rightfully so. Has the media coverage given or revealed too many secrets? No, because most of the articles that are published on this team have nothing to do with the tactical breakdown. In fact, it was one of your colleagues, right, for The Athletic, who wrote that marvelous piece on Almeida's tactical approach. But aside from that, there really hasn't been anything else. I mean, there's a lot of local coverage as of late. And all of it is truly, it's just going for, they're trying to get the clicks. I mean, the Merc, or whether it's the SF Chronicle, really hyperbolizing, by the way, the Quakes or past pre-run, not their current run, maybe the best team in America. I think that was a little overboard, but I don't think it's hurt the Quakes, per se, that they didn't figure anything out about their style through those articles.
No.
Through the coverage that we do, not really.
No, I mean, Harrison Ham's article was very good in The Athletic, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it yet, and I think it's definitely a worthwhile read. The 3 of the 4 teams that the Quakes have played recently, and it started with Columbus, they are system teams. So let's take a look at the coaches. You have Caleb Porter, who's coaching the Columbus crew, did a really good job holding on to the ball, something they had learned very well under Greg Berhalter. They used that type of tactic to be able to spread the Quakes out and be able to break them down. If you go over to Sporting Kansas City, Peter Vermees has a very specific system that he plays.
10-year plan.
In the second half, they executed Peter Vermees' system extremely well, and they used it to, again, expose the Quakes and break them down in certain areas. LAFC tonight exposed the Quakes, broke them down in certain areas. Those are 3 teams in the Western Conference that are capable of doing that. There's not very many more. Okay?
Yeah.
It shouldn't have happened against Colorado. Colorado did not break them down, despite Mark Goodman's
I
comments
think that
to
one
the contrary.
was the anomaly of.
Yeah, I think that's the anomaly of the 3. If you look ahead, Vancouver, not a system team. Okay?
Definitely not.
Orlando City,
Headless
I
chicken.
just saw Orlando City live against Toronto last week.
They're not
in
very
Toronto.
good.
Not a system team. They're going to try to hit you on the counterattack. They got a little bit of speed on the wings. That's about all they got. And if you look ahead, most of the teams that the Quakes are going to face now are not system teams. They have the ability.
There's dangerous teams in there.
There's
though,
dangerous
Jeremy.
teams, but they're not fully system teams. In fact, Atlanta has been tinkering with their system like every game all season long.
Yeah.
So you don't even know what Atlanta is going to roll out. It could be 3 in the back. That's what they've been more successful with recently. But they keep tinkering with that. They've been playing 4-4-2s and other things. So it's been the coaches who have been able to bring that kind of tactical game plan to the Quakes and be able to outcoach Matias Almeida in those situations. There's very few managers in the league who are capable of doing that, and most of the teams that the Quakes have ahead of them, yes, they're difficult teams. Yes, many of them are away games, but Jim Curtin is not going to outcoach Matias Almeida. Okay?
I don't think so.
I don't actually believe that Brian Schmesser with Seattle is going to outcoach Matias Almeida. I don't even know what Seattle's system is. people who follow Seattle. And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
This is
They
Kryptonite
drive me
team, by the way.
crazy. They drive me crazy because they're really not a good team by any of the metrics, and somehow they pull out results. But they're not a system team, right? Portland, to a little bit extent, can be. They've been very good on the counter, but when you play at home and you're playing bunkering and playing on the counter at home, it's a very weird combination. And they haven't been as successful as maybe they should have been at home in these games. So I think that a lot of what we've seen recently has to do with the types of the teams that the Quakes have played, the coaching that those teams have. And I'm looking ahead, if the Quakes impose their style and they come out and they play for 90 minutes, not the first 45, they play for 90 minutes, then I believe that the Quakes can reassert themselves back into the playoff picture and finish as high as fourth or so.
Should we be concerned? I think Jamin kind of answered that question. I think at your temperature, what would you say? Should we be concerned?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the playoff odds coming into tonight, we're still at 75%. Look, probably no one below FC Dallas has a shot to make it, and I'm not a big believer in FC Dallas. They have one player, Paxton Pomykal. You neutralize him, you've pretty much neutralized the team. And other teams have figured that out as well. They've not been on the best run of form more recently. They're the only team that's actually below the Quakes. You know, that's really got a shot to be able to push them down, right? Portland's obviously going to be able to make a move. They got a game in hand here.
Sporting Kansas City is the other, but they already played them.
They already played them, and Sporting Kansas City, by the way, have a pretty difficult schedule ahead of them if you take a look at who they got. And keep in mind that the Quakes are not playing in a vacuum here. The teams that they play, many of them also have difficult schedules the rest of the way. MNUFC's, Minnesota United's schedule, very difficult, right? So, I mean, the Quakes just have the unfortunate task of they had to play LAFC, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and
Portland,
and Portland, and teams like that. So, yeah, from a strength of schedule perspective, the Quakes have one of the highest points against strength of schedules remaining, meaning that the other teams, if you add up their points per game against the Quakes or against the league, they've got one of the toughest schedules remaining.
Are you concerned?
Of course. I mean, if I were Matias Almeida, even Jesse Fiorelli, I would be a bit concerned. They've done so much this season, and for it to just kind of semi-crumble over the last 4 games, especially tonight, it's definitely concerning. You raise your eyebrow to that. What's going on? And I think, like I said, I'll fall back on it. I think a lot of it is psychological, and it always has been psychological with this team, right? At times, the players have been questioned, and then the players step up, and then they go and they regress again, and then they're questioned. It's this on and off, But under Almeida now, going down for a second time, now I guess we can say this is the second fall under Almeida. How are they going to pick up a second time? Are they going to outdo their first, the first time they came back was very strong. The Quakes were able to march second, third in the West. The second time around, are they going to be able to get up as high? That's the big question mark for me. And when is it that they're going to pick themselves up? They're not going to have Almeida certainly for the next game. Maybe not for the game against Orlando either. So how are they going to do it? Where are they going to find that tenacity, that grit, that passion, and that physical discipline that they had a couple of weeks ago? I don't know. Maybe Benjamin Galindo and Omar Sarif have something up their sleeve. But, this form that the Quakes have displayed as of late, especially tonight, the results is what I'm referring to, definitely need to be questioned. There's a lot of questions to be asked.
Well, it's quite clear that LAFC is the bogey team for this Quakes team. I mean, 5-0 at home, 4-0 away, 3-1 away in the U.S. Open Cup. And still, I was in the build-up to this game, I was thinking to myself, the Quakes would like to prove something tonight. They would like to prove to LAFC that they can match them, that they can be there. Obviously, unfortunate with the series of events tonight, all the way up and down from the first minute all the way to the end of the match. Am I concerned? Yes. However, 2 home games coming up that are winnable, and then heading into 2 other teams that I think you can get some points off of, but a tough East Coast trip to New York and to Atlanta United, and then you're home against Philadelphia, and then you got to get some wins against the 2 Pacific Northwest teams.
New York City FC is the other opponent that we were.
Yeah, and so in the contention here, the next 2 opponents aren't really in contention for the playoffs. The other ones are, and so you got to get results against the best teams in order to be, obviously in the playoffs. So I'm concerned, yes, but again, I'm an optimist. I think you've heard me say that on this show a lot. And so I do believe that they can be able to get the points, get back to winning ways. And one of the things that Matias Almeida needs to do is make sure if he's going to rotate the squad, get that right. And make sure that he can get a result. If it's a tie on the road, good. If Magnus Eriksson didn't play again today, obviously. And so, is that a big miss for the Quakes? Wano didn't start. Is that a big miss for the Quakes? And, if Danny Houston is in the team, he's got to score. He's got a clear breakaway chance. He's got to score in positions like that. And so, again, I'm concerned, but at the same time, when he rotates, those players really have to step up and turn it on. It just shows the competition for places in this side is something. Marcelo Barriga, is there a good reason not to sell Houston and get a new striker? Now that we're on kind of this striker debate, we talk about Wanda, we talk about Houston. Now we've got Andy Rios in the fold. Now we got Fierro in the fold. A very interesting question. Who knows what's going to happen with the strikers next year? And I'm not sure what Danny Houston's contract is exactly, but he just got his green card. Wow, very interesting.
Well, it seems like every team is investing in green cards right nowadays. Anyone can go out and get one. It's hard to talk about that right now. I think we're at a point in the season where these things are very sensitive, right? We don't know the specific details. There's still 6-7 weeks left, and that can really change the theme of a certain player. That can really change the thought that us journalists or fans or even the people who work in the front office are the way that they're thinking, right? So I don't know. It's tough to talk about who's going to depart, who's going to arrive, or what player should get a contract extension and what player should get the boot.
Yeah, I mean, all season long, the Quakes have had somebody kind of step up and play the hero for a few games. Right now, no one's done that. And that's been probably the biggest problem over the last 4 games is from the attacking side. Other than the 1 goal from Vaca, there really hasn't been a lot of offensive magic. Somebody needs to step up into that. If it's not going to be Danny Houston, then maybe it can be Rios, or maybe Salinas can find his form again, or Vaca, or Wanda or Espinoza, but somebody has to. And those types of things, when you end the season and that's the last thing you remember about that particular player, that's going to have the effect in the offseason. I do think it's a bit early to think on those things. Danny Houston finds his form, scores 6 goals over the next few games. It's going to completely change the perception.
Just quick follow-up on Ren 1018's question about media coverage. He wanted to follow up about if media coverage has gotten to players' heads or not. I can't speak to that specifically. You never know. I mean, that is something that potentially could be floating around based on the Quakes' form, but you never know. I don't think I could speculate, on that at all.
I think the players now more than ever, with social media and with MLS getting more and more coverage as the years go on, e.g. The Athletic, Pro Soccer USA, and other publications out there have brought more quality, right? More quality coverage on the league, on specific teams, the Quakes. I think we've all been doing our fair share of work to try and bring as much coverage about this team forward. And the players are keeping tabs about what the media is saying, sure. Do I know if it influences them? That's not for me to say, to be honest with you. When I interact with the players, everyone seems cool, calm, collective, confident, humble at times. Things are just not really working out for them right now. And I think it just, like I said, it comes down to the fact that they probably don't believe in themselves. They don't think that, what once got them these praises, from people all around the league and maybe even from people abroad is not there anymore. They're going to have to find it back one way or another, or else they're going to see themselves out of the playoffs this season.
Yeah, Quakes are very selective about, the Quakes PR is very selective about who they put in front of the media. And for the most part, those are players with level heads. They're not going to let too much of the attention get to them. I don't think that they're believing their own hype. I don't think that's the problem here. I agree with Joel. Largely, this is a crisis of confidence, and they need to believe in the system and commit to the system.
Final thoughts tonight, Joel?
Well, I think obviously a painful loss for the Quakes, for Quakes fans who watch tonight, and for those who are going to find out about the result sooner rather than later. The big takeaway for me is that Almeida, fiasco, really. It's what it was. Like I said, it's justified. Pro needs to do a much better job of being consistent, of making the right calls, of being, self-reflective, and just holding themselves accountable. They haven't done that. They haven't done that for many years. And I think the league has improved so much that, the performances on the field vastly outweigh the officiating quality. And when that happens, when you have this disparity, certain instances like this can boil up and just go all over the place. And even more so with coaches like Matias Almeida, right? Who's known for being very passionate, a world-class coach who might throw these tantrums, quote unquote, south of the border. That is common south of the border. Matias could have done this any given night at Chivas, could have done this any given night with River Plate. They have different translations of instances like the ones that occurred tonight. Here, stateside, things are very different. Everything's a bit more regulated. And I think they're going to come down a lot harder on Almeida, maybe than he even expects. And certainly that's going to influence the Quakes play the next couple of weeks, which is not what you want when you've only picked up a point in your last 4 games. You're 6th in the West, and things are just not going in your favor.
Turns out when your manager gets kicked out in a soccer game, it doesn't have the same effect as a baseball game. Who knew? The Quakes definitely seemed a bit unorganized. A bit scattered in the way that they played after Almeida was dismissed. If they're not going to have Almeida for the next 2 games, let's say, they're going to need to be able to regroup under the interim manager. We presume that'll be Gallindo. They're going to need to regroup, and they're going to need to focus, and they're going to need to win for each other. They're going to need to win because they've put too much into this. At this point, they've come too far to not make the playoffs. They need to get at least a 6th or 7th spot at this point. And the good news is that the teams under them are not pressuring them so highly that they can't be able to survive and be able to find a way through this. So they're just going to have to find their way through the next couple games, get the results. Like you said, opportunity to take 6 points. 6 points right now in the Western Conference.
9 points
is going to really change the standings in the conference.
Given the fact that RSL lost Pecky and you don't know how they're going to play gaming week in and week out, I think they can be a very inconsistent team these last 8-7 games of the season. I think there's a really, really good chance that they can also pick up 3 points against RSL. But Charles, really quick, what was my prediction on where the Quakes would end up?
I'm pretty sure that you said that the Quakes would finish in the 6th or 7th spot in the playoffs.
I think he's very good about reminding us it was the 6th spot. So
6th or 7th.
So you said 6th.
or 6.
So if it's
Told me
the
to the
7th,
6th.
if it's the 7th, you
Then
can't
I
take credit
then
for
I
it.
busted you.
My final thoughts tonight just wasn't the Quakes night, just cascading one thing after the next. The Matias Almeida situation, extremely unfortunate. The Quakes not given a penalty and then getting scored on immediately right after. He goes down the tunnel as well, going in down 3-0 at that point. 2 winnable games coming up, both at home. March 30th was the last time the Quakes lost at home. In all competitions, mind you. There's a friendly U.S. Open Cup match as well. And so things at home are okay for the Quakes. And so if you're a Quakes fan, you're a Quakes supporter, you got season tickets, get out there, be loud, be proud, be behind this team. Obviously there's probably some tired legs at the end of the night. Summer soccer is, game after game after game. But a little stretch here to maybe pick up the steam heading into the final 6 games. Only 8 games to go. And we could potentially find the Quakes in a playoff position. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. We always appreciate you guys tuning in and helping to grow the game, helping to grow this community. This is what this show is about. We are an inclusive show. We care about y'all, and we love hearing your questions and your comments as well. Appreciate the chance to explain myself as well. And then finally, before we go, I'm just going to give a shout out to our executive producer and director, Jason Sholl, who was voted as a list maker in the top LGBT companies, voted on by the Silicon Valley Business Journal for his work in the community and his small business, Jason Sholl. So give him a little round of applause. List maker, top LGBTQ company from the Silicon Valley Business Journal. And I think it may have been the 2nd year in a row that he's maybe been on this special list. So what a guy. Our associate producer is his brother, Aaron Sholl, Jamin Moore, Joel Soria, Charles Wollin. Thanks so much for tuning in to Black and Azul. We'll see you next week. Take care.